Sarada is a lonely orphan who got kicked out from his dormitory due to his obsession with cats. Eventually, he ends up in a dormitory full of freaky girls and is forced to do home chores for them all while trying to score himself a cute girlfriend.
Nice.
On a beautiful day, there's this boy named Sarada Kanda who is attending a really boring class at school, but turns out it was just a dream. Upon waking up, the first thing he sees is his cat. After he puts down the cat, he finds Misaki Kamagusa sleeping in his room. He kicks her out and gets ready for school. While leaving, the dorm advisor, Chihiro, asks him to fix the nameplate outside. While he's fixing it, they introduce the other people living in the dorm. Misaki, the quirky animator in room 201, Jin Mitaka, the super popular guy in room 103, Chihiro, the lazy art teacher, Ryunosuke Akasaka, the genius programmer in room 102, and Sarada, who is just a normal guy in room 101. Later at school, Sarada meets Daichai and Nanami. They talk about how Sarada moved to Sakurasu dormitory because he rescued some cats. Daichai and Nanami warn Sarada that if he keeps bringing in more cats, he won't be able to go back to the regular dorm. Nanami even gives Sarada a bag of cat food. During lunch break, Sarada enters the teacher's room and informs Chihiro about a nameplate. Chihiro then asks Sarada to do her another favor, to pick up her cousin, Mishiro Shina. Turns out, she will be moving to Sakurasu and transferring to Suiko. As Sarada walks to the station, he decides to take a little break and stops by some shops. He buys a piece of cake and starts eating it while waiting. Suddenly, he notices a girl sitting nearby with long white hair that looks just like the photo he saw. Sarada thinks that it must be Mashiro, so he goes up to her and greets her. He tells her that Chihiro asked him to pick her up and bring her to Sakurasu. Before they leave, they have a quick chat about their favorite colors. Once they return to Sakurasu, the super lively Misaki throws a big welcome party for Mashiro. The party is filled with delicious food and Misaki even shows off her new animation. However, when she does the voiceovers for the characters, they are completely out of sync. After the animation finishes, Misaki asks for feedback, but only Jin responds. The next day, when Sarada is getting ready for school, Chihiro asks him to look after Mashiro. At first, Sarada doesn't really know what kind of help Mashiro needs, so he thinks it's just basic assistance for a new girl. However, soon he realizes that taking care of Mashiro involves much more than that. Mashiro doesn't know how to take care of herself, so she relies on others to do everything for her, like picking out clothes, doing laundry, cleaning her room, drying her hair, and even waking her up. Mashiro is completely dependent. With no other choice, Sarada takes on the responsibility of looking after Mashiro and making sure she's ready for school. Sarada gathers all the members of Sakurasu and shares Mashiro's problem. He wants everyone to share the responsibility, but somehow the discussion turns one-sided and Sarada ends up being appointed as the one to take care of Mashiro. Sarada plans to cook breakfast, but because of his duty to Mashiro and some trouble she causes, he can't make breakfast. He decides to buy it from a convenience store instead. While Sarada is busy choosing the food, Mashiro goes ahead and opens a bankuchen and starts eating it without paying. Sarada notices this and gets really upset and worried. He starts asking Mashiro about what she did back in England, but all she says is that she painted pictures. Just as Sarada is in the middle of all this, Nanami suddenly appears. After talking with Nanami and dealing with Mashiro eating another bankuchen, the three of them start walking to school. Along the way, Nanami asks Sarada about the girl with him, so he introduces them to each other. Just then, Mashiro says that Sarada is her first male friend, which causes a misunderstanding with Nanami. Sarada tries to explain, but Nanami ends up running away, leaving both of them. At school, Nanami is having lunch with her friend who asks about Sarada. Nanami answers in a weird way, which makes her friend confused and suspicious. Meanwhile, Sarada can't afford his own lunch because of Mashiro, so he ends up talking to Chihiro while drinking some water. He tries to ask for some help, but Chihiro changes the topic. After that, Sarada goes back to class where Miyahara shows him some news about Misaki and Jin, who receive great reviews for their anime. Suddenly, Mashiro comes to visit and says she wants to go home alone. Sarada hesitates at first, but after looking around the classroom, he decides to let Mashiro go home by herself. During all this, Nanami keeps blushing and gets angry at Sarada. After school, Sarada sees Mashiro walking with a woman by the school gate who turns out to be manga editor Ida Ayano. While walking by the convenience store where Nanami works, Mashiro decides to stop by to clear up the misunderstanding between her and Sarada. Before Mashiro leaves, Ayano interrupts their conversation and buys 2 bankuchen. At Sakurasu, when Sarada gets home, his cat Hikari greets him, but there is a trail of cabbage leading to his room. Jin shows up and mentions that it is his birthday and that Misaki has done something with the cabbages. Jin asks Sarada to come with him, and they discover a big present box in Jin's room. Inside, Misaki is already waiting. wearing only a ribbon to cover herself. Sarada then goes back to his room, leaving Jin and Misaki behind. While Sarada is busy playing games and trying to contact Ryunosuke, Mashiro comes into his room and asks Sarada to go to her room. In her room, Mashiro asks Sarada to take off his clothes so she can draw a man's body. They have a little argument, but Sarada agrees as long as he can keep his boxers on. Mashiro observes Sarada's body and starts drawing. They continue their research all night, asking each other questions about relationships between men and women. The next morning, Sarada bumps into Misaki and asks her about what happened the day before. They have a quick chat, and then Sarada goes to take out the trash. While he is at the trash collection point, he runs into Nanami. They have a short conversation, but Nanami seems a bit awkward. When Sarada returns to Sakurasu, he finds a book with a beautiful picture in it and compliments it. Mashiro replies with a thanks, which confuses Sarada. Jin points out that Sarada still doesn't know who Mashiro really is. So Sarada does some research and discovers that Mashiro is actually a famous painter from England. Sarada is taking a bath and thinking about Mashiro when suddenly she calls his name and enters the bath. She starts talking about shower events for her manga and sprays cold water in Sarada's face. After doing so, she heads back to her room. Before she leaves, Sarada is about to tell her to work hard, but he hesitates. While walking back to his room, he hears some voices in the dining room. It's Jin talking on the phone. After Jin finishes his call, Sarada comes out and starts a conversation with Jin about the call before and about Sarada's goal to leave and his problems. Jin keeps pushing Sarada about his goal, stating that he is sick of Sarada's uncertainty towards leaving Sakurasu, until the point Sarada loses his patience and leaves the room. Upon leaving, Sarada meets with Chihiro, who is going to enter the dining room. Chihiro and Jin have some discussion about the previous issue involving Sarada. In his own room, Sarada discovers a game design competition through an advertisement, and it catches his interest. He wants to ask Ryunosuke for advice on making a game, but he feels unsure and ends up making posters for his cats instead. The next day at school, while Sarada is putting up the posters, he meets Nanami, who willingly helps him. Shortly after, Nanami returns with Mashiro, who wants to take care of the cats, but Sarada rejects her offer. Mashiro then asks Sarada to go out with her on Sunday, but he refuses and suggests she ask Jin instead, making it seem like he has no involvement in her plans for that day. On Sunday morning, Misaki bursts into Sarada's room and pulls him out of bed. She tells him that Jin and Mashiro went to a hotel for a date. Sarada is completely shocked by this news. Chihiro tries to explain that it's just for research, but Sarada doesn't believe it because Jin is known for being popular with girls. With that, they quickly decide to chase after them. With the help of Ryunosuke's AI maid, they manage to locate Jin and Mashiro. While they're following them, they run into Nanami, who is working part-time at a shop. After Nanami goes back to work, Misaki feels sad about seeing Jin with Mashiro and wonders why she can't be the one by his side. After wandering around a shopping mall, Jin and Mashiro head towards the Love Hotel. Misaki can't bear to watch and starts crying. Heartbroken, she goes home. Sarada, filled with anger, tries to punch Jin but ends up getting punched instead. He faints, and when he wakes up, he finds himself inside the hotel with Mashiro, while Jin has already left. When Sarada wakes up, Mashiro explains that everything was planned with Jin, including Jin taking the punch, but Sarada's reflexes got the best of him. Mashiro clarifies that she was at the hotel for research, not for anything else. Sarada gets upset with her for not considering the implications of going to a hotel with a guy. However, Mashiro argues that Sarada doesn't understand his own purpose and where he belongs compared to her, who is determined to pursue her passion for painting. Later that night, Sarada calls Jin and asks him to go back to the dorms for Misaki. Jin, wanting to comfort Misaki, says something bad. Sarada also reflects on his fight with Mashiro and decides that he wants to leave Sakurasu. The next day, Sarada announces his decision to leave, which only makes Mashiro angrier with him. Sarada is getting ready to move out of Sakurasu and remembers the moment he told Mashiro about his decision. Mashiro has been dedicating all her spare time to finishing her manga for the competition. Once Sarada finishes packing, he tries to leave the house, but Misaki stops him and shows him Mashiro wearing a yukata. Sarada is shocked and can't find the right words to say, so the two girls leave, calling him an idiot. After they leave, Jin comes out and tells Sarada that they're going to celebrate Tanabata and gives him a yukata. While Misaki and Jin help children hang up their wishes, Sarada and Mashiro sit together on a bench, contemplating Mashiro's wish. Just as she hangs up her wish, it starts raining, and the celebration is cancelled. After everyone dries off in the dining room, Mashiro gets a phone call informing her that she didn't win the competition. Sarada tries to comfort her, but unintentionally hurts her feelings instead. Realizing his mistake, Sarada runs out of the house and into the rain. Jin follows him and tries to console him, explaining that artists often struggle between the real world and their own world. Sarada also learns that Jin has feelings for Misaki but feels there's a big gap between them. They both head home, and when Sarada gets to his room, he finds that Ryunosuke has loaned him some books about game design. Sarada has a short conversation with his maid, who suggests he read the books until he gains a deeper understanding. Meanwhile, Mashiro isolates herself in her room. The next morning, when Sarada knocks on Mashiro's door to deliver her breakfast, she doesn't respond, so he leaves the meal in front of her door. After that, Sarada removes the bamboo from last night's celebration and discovers Mashiro's wish. At school, Sarada meets up with Nanami, and they make plans to take care of the remaining 2 cats that haven't been adopted yet. As they walk home, Ayano suddenly intercepts Sarada and takes him to a cafe. At the cafe, Ayano shows Sarada a manga based on his experiences with Mashiro, but with the genders reversed. The male character is as confident as Mashiro, while the female character is as unsure as Sarada himself. Ayano explains that she advised Mashiro to base the manga on the events at Sakurasu. She mentions that the manga is great, but the ending needs editing for a chance at publication. Understanding why Mashiro settled for that ending, Sarada rushes home immediately. On the way, he stops by the school to hand over his career survey to Chihiro, stating that he wants to be a game developer. Finally, Sarada hurries home to clarify to Mashiro how she misunderstood his wish. Once Sarada arrives home, he immediately goes to Mashiro's room and explains everything to her. He confesses that he was scared to pursue his own dreams because he was afraid of failing. However, he tells Mashiro that after seeing her work, he greatly admired her and hopes to become like her one day. As Sarada raises his voice, Misaki tries to go upstairs, but Jin stops her. While talking, Sarada notices that the food he left earlier is still untouched. Curious, he enters Mashiro's room and finds her asleep. It turns out she had worked all night to create the ending she desired, not the one that actually happened. This deeply touches Sarada, and he decides to stay at Sakurasu with everyone else. Once Mashiro wakes up, Sarada explains everything to her, including the possibility of her manga being published. Mashiro asks Sarada to call her by her first name from that moment on. Shortly after, Jin and Misaki rush in and celebrate Sarada's return. While studying together, Sarada is super surprised because Mashiro gets 0 points on all her exams, even in English, even though she used to live in England. Mashiro says it's because she's too confused with her manga deadline. Jin comes to Sarada's room and Sarada asks for his help in teaching Mashiro. While they're talking, Mashiro keeps drawing for her manga. Suddenly, Misaki shows up through the window and tells them that the makeup exams for art class are usually just like the practice exams. And guess what? Mashiro shocks Sarada by saying she already memorized all the answers to the practice exam. To make sure, Sarada asks her random questions, and she answers all of them correctly. After studying, Misaki asks them to play a video game. Sarada plays with Mashiro but gets lost on his first try. Later, Sarada and Jin sit together in the dining room waiting while Mashiro and Misaki play in Sarada's room. Suddenly, Misaki comes out and pulls Sarada back in. The next day, Sarada walks Mashiro to school for her makeup exam, and then he waits in his classroom where he meets Nanami. While chatting, Nanami's tummy growls, so Sarada gives her bankuchen, which was actually meant for Mashiro. Nanami leaves for work, and then Sarada meets with Mashiro, who got a perfect score on all her exams. On their way home, they bump into Nanami, who almost collapses from overwork but doesn't want to admit it. She explains to Sarada why she works so hard, and that's when Sarada invites her to move over to Sakurasu. Out of the blue, Mashiro asks Sarada to call her by her first name, which leads to another misunderstanding with Nanami. Just as they're about to clear things up, Mashiro unexpectedly falls asleep, making the confusion even more complicated. Because of all this chaos, Nanami decides to move to Sakurasu to see the truth for herself. Sarada starts freaking out because Nanami might expose his role as Mashiro's duty holder when she moves in. Jin suggests that Sarada and Mashiro pretend to be in a relationship to avoid misunderstandings, but Sarada completely rejects the idea. Mashiro comes up with another plan to get rid of Nanami. In the end, Sarada decides to try his own plan first, and if it doesn't work, they'll go with Jin's backup plan. Mashiro insists on her plan, but Sarada and Jin are shocked and reject the idea. The next day, Nanami moves her stuff to Sakurasu and is welcomed by Misaki. She playfully rummages through Nanami's boxes, scattering her plot to find something interesting. Suddenly, Mashiro enters with tea stains on her clothes. Nanami sees this and quickly takes Mashiro back to her room to change. She's surprised to find that Mashiro's room is a complete mess. Sarada then explains Mashiro's situation to Nanami. After learning about what happened to Mashiro, Nanami insists on taking over Mashiro's responsibilities, believing that a girl should take care of another girl. However, little did she know, this decision would come back to haunt her. After taking on the responsibility, Nanami tries to teach Mashiro everyday tasks like laundry and cleaning, but they don't succeed. In the evenings, Mashiro asks Sarada to fold her plot, and Nanami always comes in and takes care of it. While looking after Mashiro, Nanami realizes how hard Mashiro works on her manga and is impressed. However, when Nanami tries it herself, she somehow goes overboard. Meanwhile, Sarada continues working on his game competition and asks Runosuke for feedback. The result isn't too bad, but there's still a lot of room for improvement before submitting it. That night, while Sarada was sleeping, Mashiro unexpectedly came into his room and slept beside him. Sarada asked Mashiro to buy her manga debut, but she was already asleep when he finished speaking. Sarada then left his room and found Nanami sleeping in the dining room. When he tried to wake her up, Nanami mistakenly thought he had broken into her room and punched him. Sarada tried to explain that she shouldn't overreact, but she got angry instead. Nanami expressed her desire to do things on her own and then bumped into Jin at the door. She pushed Sarada and Jin outside so she could clean the room. Afterward, they all returned to their own rooms, but Sarada couldn't sleep because Mashiro was occupying his bed and it was already morning. Nanami can't find Mashiro in her own room, so she hurries to Sarada's room and discovers Mashiro sleeping there. Aoyama wakes Mashiro up and gets scolded for being in a boy's room. Later, when they go to do Mashiro's laundry, they find Sarada sleeping there too. Nanami wakes him up and scolds him for letting Mashiro sleep in his room. Mashiro, holding her favorite Bonkuchin, acts innocent. Nanami starts doing the laundry, but then Mashiro tries to pour detergent and fails because the cap is still on. From Mashiro's glare, Nanami realizes that she prefers it when Sarada takes care of Mashiro. Later at the school, Nanami and her friends are practicing for an important audition. This audition will help determine which students move forward. Nanami gets inspired by Mashiro while working on her manga and decides to put in more effort. When they all return to Sakurasu, Nanami takes charge of cooking dinner. She calls everyone to come and eat, but when she tries to call Mashiro, she discovers that she's fast asleep. Later, in her own room, Nanami continues practicing for her upcoming audition. While Sarada and Jin are having a chat, they notice that Nanami is pushing herself too hard. Jin suggests that Sarada should just let Nanami be, since they don't fully understand her situation. Still, Jin decides to leave Kanda to his own devices. As Sarada is about to leave, he learns that Jin plans to go to Osaka instead of Suimai, leaving Misaki behind. This news troubles Sarada when he's back in his room. Out of the blue, Misaki appears and asks Sarada what he's talking about. Sensing something's off, Misaki realizes what Sarada is implying and starts to get emotional. Sarada then asks Misaki what she really wants in her relationship with Jin, and she confesses that she wants to be his girlfriend. To cheer her up, Sarada suggests playing a game together, although he's unsure of what to say to Misaki. The next day at work, Nanami is really feeling the effects of working too hard. And guess what? Sarada is just about to submit his work for the competition. But then, his cat accidentally makes him submit it early. Just as Sarada is recovering from his fall, Mashiro gives him a call. She tells him that Nanami has been acting weird all morning. Worried, Sarada rushes out to find Nanami. Turns out, she's sick from all the stress but still trying to go to school. Poor thing collapses, but luckily Sarada catches her. Later on, everyone at Sakurasu, except Runosuke and Chihiro, gathers to talk about Nanami's situation. They all agree that they can't just let her go. Mashiro, being Mashiro, speaks up and says they should let her go, considering how hard she's worked for the competition. After some pleading from Mashiro, they all decide to help Nanami go to Seiyu's school. Later at the school, Nanami goes inside while Sarada and Mashiro take shelter at a nearby store as it starts raining. While they're there, Sarada remembers that he promised to buy Mashiro's first manga, but when Sarada tries to talk to Mashiro about it, he realizes that Mashiro is completely focused on Nanami. Turns out, the audition didn't go well at all, and Aoyama's cousins are angry with her. While they're waiting for a cab, Nanami apologizes to Sarada for causing trouble for everyone. She feels bad because they all worked hard to help her get to school, but she ended up failing. She regrets putting in so much effort and starts calling herself an idiot, but Sarada tells her to stop. He says that if she's an idiot, then the whole world is too. He continues by saying that everyone in Sakurasu sees how hard she tries. Nanami admits that all she wanted was for someone to say those words, and she cries tears of happiness when Sarada says them. Back at Sakurasu, Sarada, Jin, and Misaki are talking about Nanami while Mashiro is sleeping beside her. The three of them, especially Sarada, understand what Jin means when he says that he had a different impression of Nanami. Jin explains that Nanami is fighting something, and she doesn't want to rely on anyone because she thinks it will make her weak. The next morning, Jin cooks some food and Sarada brings it to Aoyama's room. Aoyama talks to her stuffed toy, Torajiru, about what happened yesterday. It's pretty clear that Aoyama has a big crush on Sarada. Since Mashiro is holding Aoyama's hand, Sarada ends up feeding Nanami instead. Sarada explains how Mashiro understands Nanami better than anyone else, and Ayama agrees that she would have regretted not going to the audition. Nanami decides to give back the responsibility of taking care of Mashiro to Sarada, and he thanks her for trusting him. On a random day, there's this girl named Yuuko who reveals to be Sarada's little sister. When she arrives, she sees Sarada and Mashiro in a funny situation. It happened because Sarada slipped on a banana while trying to get Mashiro to put her clothes on. Yuuko and Mashiro end up in Sarada's room, and Yuuko gets a bit aggressive with Mashiro. Sarada tries to call his mom but ends up talking to his dad first. Eventually, he gets through to his mom, who explains that Yuuko came because she had questions about high school. Meanwhile, Mashiro asks Sarada about Yuuko's relationship with him, but Yuuko counters questions to Mashiro. Mashiro says that Sarada is her owner, which confuses Yuuko. Meanwhile, Misaki has a wild driving lesson where she keeps pressing on the gas and ignoring the brakes. Her teacher, Shiori, looks terrified. After a little while, Nanami comes back home and goes straight to Sarada's room. She's surprised to see a little girl holding onto Sarada's arm. Sarada tries to explain, but Nanami's response only makes Yuuko more suspicious about their relationship. Yuuko asks Nanami why she's so close to her brother, and Nanami explains that Sarada helps her a lot. However, Yuuko misunderstands and thinks it's something romantic. Sarada tries to prove that there's another guy in the house by knocking on Ryunosuke's room, but only his maid answers. This convinces Yuuko that her brother is living in a house full of girls. As they chase each other in the hallway, they find out that the bathroom is flooded because Mashiro used it earlier. After fixing the bath in a hurry, they find Mashiro shows up rubbing her stomach. She tells them that it's ready, but Yuuko misunderstood and thought something bad was happening. Actually, Mashiro just meant that dinner was ready. Once everything was cleaned up, everyone at Sakurasu, except for Ryunosuke and Misaki, who was still at driving school, had dinner together. Since their private bath was still broken, they decided to go to the public baths. The next day, Misaki continued her driving lessons, still being reckless like yesterday. At Sakurasu, Sarada started a new habit of checking the mailbox every morning, hoping to find the results of his game competition. However, there was nothing in the mailbox, so he went back to his room. Inside his room, Sarada asked Yuuko about the high school advice she mentioned earlier. Turns out, it was just an excuse for her to see Sarada. She even suggested going on a date. When the word date came up, the other two girls overheard and wanted to join in too. At the start of their date, Sarada asked why Nanami and Mashiro joined them when they had other things to do. Nanami explained that it was her day off, and Mashiro mentioned that her editor suggested she enjoy the summer. Yuuko, as usual, misunderstood Mashiro's words and had some creep thoughts. They visited a park with different stands and later went to a shrine to pray. While leaving the shrine, they accidentally split into two groups without realizing it. Sarada and Nanami were together when Nanami tripped on the stairs, but Sarada caught her and made her blush. Nanami then realized they were separated and started looking for the others. Meanwhile, Mashiro and Yuuko stopped at a candy apple stand, where Mashiro ate an apple and they sat down on a staircase. Yuuko started to doubt if Sarada would find them, but Mashiro has faith in him. Eventually, Sarada finds them, but they had a small encounter with the candy stall owner who wanted payment for Mashiro's apple. The next day, Yuuko left for Fukuoka and shared her plan to study at Suiko to be with her brother. The others were thrilled and said they would wait for her to join them next year. While Yuuko was explaining Sarada's relationships, the train suddenly departed. Meanwhile, Misaki successfully got her driving license and proudly waved it in the air. Her driving instructor, Shiori, looked a bit worried on the side, regretting having Misaki as her student. Nanami gave Sarada 2 letters while wearing glasses, which surprised Sarada and others. When Sarada opened the first letter, he found out that he passed the first round of the game design competition and needed to do a presentation on August 31st. Later, in Sarada's room, Mashiro came in and asked him about love. Sarada figured out that Mashiro is the one who wrote the strange letter. He explains the concept of love using fish as an example. Mashiro then asked Sarada to teach her about love because she needed to feel it for her romantic novel. She also mentioned having a serialization meeting on the same day as Sarada's presentation. Even though Mashiro offered to help Sarada, he declined because she needed to prepare for her meeting too. Just then, Nanami burst into the room and told Mashiro to leave. Mashiro explained to Nanami that she came into Sarada's room to ask him about love. Sarada told Nanami about the funny letter he received in Mashiro's editor. But Nanami still insisted on dragging Mashiro out, using the excuse that Sarada needed time for his presentation. Suddenly, Misaki appeared through the window and made the situation even worse. This led Sarada to forcefully push all 3 of them out of his room. Outside, Mashiro asked Nanami if she understood what love is. Back in his room, Sarada sought advice from Ryunosuke on how to give a presentation. Ryunosuke jokingly suggested wearing a suit but also advised Sarada to practice his presentation with everyone at Sakurasu. Feeling down and unsure of what to do, Sarada sighed and then noticed Jin, Misaki, Nanami, and Mashiro staring at him from outside the room. Jin offered to help Sarada, and Sarada accepted. The next day, Sarada gave his presentation in front of the other Sakurasu residents. Unfortunately, his first attempt was so boring that it put Mashiro to sleep. With that, Sarada decided to redo his presentation and present it again the next day. While he was working on his script, Mashiro unexpectedly entered his room and started drawing her character design there. She believed that being in Sarada's room would help her understand love better. They had a little argument, but Sarada continued preparing his presentation throughout the night. During that time, Nanami prepared some snacks for him after seeing him work so hard. This routine went on for 10 iterations until Sarada finally settled on his final presentation. On the day of the presentation, right before Sarada left Sakurasu, Mashiro approached him and gave him a lucky charm that she had bought all by herself the day before. Impressed by her thoughtfulness, Sarada wished her good luck for both of them and then headed out. At the presentation, Sarada meets Kazuki Fujisawa, who happens to be one of the judges. Unfortunately, right before Sarada starts his presentation, Kazuki asks him a question that he can't answer, which leads to his game not being accepted. Back at Sakurasu, Sarada is sitting on the porch, feeling upset and crying. Mashiro comes out and asks about his presentation. Sarada holds himself back and asks about Mashiro's meeting instead. He finds out that she succeeded, but he's still feeling sad. In a way to ask her to go away without directly saying it, Sarada asks Mashiro to continue her drawings. Eventually, Mashiro leaves with disappointment while Nanami overhears their conversation. Meanwhile, Jin and Misaki plan to have a pool party. They want to welcome Nanami and console Sarada. Nanami objects to the plan because she's still concerned about Sarada's mood, but Misaki ignores her. In Sarada's room, he tries to throw away his presentation script and the letter from the game competition, but he can't bring himself to do it. Suddenly, Misaki bursts in through the window with a big box of swimsuits. She tells Sarada about the pool party plan at the school's pool. Sarada is doubtful about using the pool, but Jin assures him that they have permission from Chihiro. Nanami enters the room and initially refuses to go because she knows Sarada is feeling down. But to her surprise, Sarada says he wants to go, so she decides to come along too. At the pool, they all have a great time playing together, splashing and having water fights. After they finish playing, they cook sukiyaki in a pot. But just as they're about to eat, the school guard shows up and starts chasing them. Jin admits that they didn't actually have permission to use the pool, so he tells everyone to run. After escaping the school guard, they continue running until they reach the gate and climb out. Outside the school, Nanami asks Sarada if he's sad, and he admits that he is. Suddenly, fireworks light up the sky, and they all stop to watch. Mashiro realizes they still need to keep running because the guard is still chasing them. Sarada and Nanami have a conversation about his depression, and they figure out that the main cause is Sarada taking the competition too seriously and forgetting about the joy of doing it. This made him unable to escape his frustrations. Sarada realizes that the key to staying happy is to keep doing what he loves, no matter the consequences. Meanwhile, Nanami shows signs of her love for Sarada, but he doesn't notice. Back at Sakurasu, they continue the party by lighting sparklers. Mashiro and Nanami have a conversation, with Nanami sharing that she's starting to understand what love is. Sarada gets startled when Misaki and Mashiro start painting on his wall. They're drawing a character named Nyaboran, which Misaki has been imagining since she was a kid and is now getting serialized. Misaki mentions that it takes 3 days to summarize the series. The next day at school, Sarada meets Nanami and asks her to wake him up tomorrow because he almost didn't make it to school today. Misaki had taken out the battery from his alarm clock. Suddenly, their classmates start spreading rumors about them, saying that Nanami is chasing after Sarada by joining him at Sakurasu. Just when Sarada and Nanami are feeling embarrassed, Sarada's friend, Daichi Miyahara, stands up to defend them. Unfortunately, this leads to a new rumor that Miyahara and Sarada are in a relationship. Back at Sakurasu, Nanami expresses her frustration during dinner, blaming the way of living in Sakurasu for the rumors. She insists that they need to fix their lifestyle in Sakurasu. During dinner, there's a knock on the door, and Sarada goes to answer it. He's surprised to see a beautiful blonde girl named Ainsworth Rita. Sarada is left speechless when Rita starts flirting with him in Japanese. Mashiro and the other members of Sakurasu come out, and Mashiro hugs Rita, revealing that they were roommates in England. Chihiro, who recognizes Rita, introduces her to everyone. Rita explains that she came to take Mashiro back, but Mashiro refuses. In response, Mashiro pushes Rita out of the house and closes the door. Feeling sorry for Rita, Sarada goes out and invites her to stay, despite objections from the others in Sakurasu. Rita insists on sleeping in Sarada's room, and although he initially refuses, he eventually agrees. Rita promises to tell Sarada all about Mashiro's past in England since they are childhood friends. The next morning, Sarada wakes up to find Rita half asleep, hugging him in his futon. Mashiro enters the room and asks Sarada if he's now on Rita's side. Before Sarada can respond, Rita interrupts and says she'll continue staying with Sarada until Mashiro decides to go back to England. The other members of Sakurasu join in teasing Sarada, causing a commotion. Ryunosuke, who rarely leaves his room, finally comes out and introduces himself to the new members of Sakurasu. At school, Ryunosuke was making a lot of noise while typing on his keyboard and munching on tomatoes. This made his teacher, Koharu Shiroyama, really angry. When she tried to get his attention, Ryunosuke told her that he only came to class to meet the minimum attendance requirements, which made her even more mad. He further annoyed the teacher by asking her to teach something that would actually interest him. Meanwhile, Sarada and Nanami were discussing Rita and Mashiro. Nanami reminded Sarada that not everything gets a second chance. And if Mashiro goes back to England, it won't be easy to bring her back to Japan. Back at Sakurasu, Sarada was thinking about what Nanami said while finishing up Mashiro's laundry. As he was about to return the laundry to Mashiro, he accidentally bumped into her just outside his room. When he tried to give it back, Mashiro called him stupid. She kept saying it multiple times. Afterwards, all the residents of Sakurasu gathered to discuss the upcoming cultural festival. Misaki and Jin, who would be graduating soon, were determined to make it a memorable event. Misaki suggested creating something unique that only the members of Sakurasu could accomplish. They divided the tasks based on each resident's talents, Mashiro and Misaki for the graphics, Jin for the script, Nanami for the voice, and Ryunosuke for the code. Sarada proposed an interactive story where the audience's reactions would shape the narrative. Mashiro then suggested using Nyaboran as the foundation. Once the plan was set, they appointed Sarada as the director. Although he was initially overwhelmed by the responsibility, Sarada eventually accepted the role. Later, while Sarada was busy planning, Mashiro came to his room and asked Rita to stay in her own room so Sarada could focus. Rita agreed, as long as she could go on a date with Sarada. On the following Sunday, Rita surprises Sarada by taking him to a hotel for their date. Unbeknownst to them, Mashiro and Nanami secretly follow them. Once inside the hotel, Rita notices Mashiro and Nanami and invites them to join as well. They all end up at an art exhibition in the hotel. While Mashiro is captivated by one painting, Rita takes Nanami and Sarada to another artwork, which Mashiro had created. The painting is incredibly beautiful, and it convinces Sarada that Mashiro should continue pursuing her art. Sarada is having a tough time with his job as a producer, and he finds Rita playing a video game in his room. He asks her why she's there, and she explains that Mashiro is busy working in her own room. While in Sarada's room, Rita notices his work and decides to teach him how to draw properly using a reference. During their conversation, Rita mentions her curiosity about the outcomes of Genius's work. Sarada then asks her about the connection between her statement about being with Mashiro for too long and her decision to stop drawing. Before Rita can respond, Mashiro enters the room and hands in the character designs, which Sarada and Misaki quickly explain. At school, they had a discussion about the project, and little by little, they made progress every day. They gathered on the rooftop to talk about it. Jin and Sarada discussed the storyboard. Misaki worked on the graphics and frames for the anime. Ryunosuke focused on building the program, and Sarada combined everything, assembling the hardware. Meanwhile, Rita, who wasn't directly involved in the project, watched them all working hard. One night, while Rita was secretly watching Sarada work in his room, she ran into Ryunosuke. He straightforwardly criticized her fake smile and vaguely mentioned that he only needed to know the reason behind her decision to stop painting to understand her better. The next day at school, during another meeting, two problems came up. The student council requested a presentation from them for the festival, and they still needed to complete the graphics with only 2 days left until the deadline. They realized they needed an additional person to help them produce the anime on time. As they were leaving the rooftop, they bumped into the student council president, Takebayashi Suikaru, who was with his girlfriend, Haimiya Sayori. She agrees to contribute music to the project while Takebayashi and Jin got into an argument about the demands. On their way home, they were brainstorming for a solution to their problem. Suddenly, Mashiro mentioned that there was someone who could match her drawing skills. When they arrived at Sakurasu, they met Rita and asked for her help. However, she declined, explaining that she had already given up on painting. Mashiro persisted and kept asking for Rita's assistance, which led to Rita confessing that she had stopped drawing because of Mashiro. Rita then shared her past experiences with Mashiro and how she felt during that time. She revealed that her classmates in England became frustrated because they couldn't match Mashiro's talent and eventually quit. Rita explained that Mashiro didn't bother to lower herself to their level to make them feel less intimidated. Rita also admitted that she introduced Mashiro to manga as a way to hurt her. She thought it would expose Mashiro to troubles and make her experience what everyone else felt. However, Mashiro's manga ended up being a huge success. Rita expressed her envy and admiration by saying that she wanted Mashiro to become famous so that she could proudly brag about studying at the same 8th year. After Rita finished speaking, Ryunosuke asked her to step aside and criticized her bluntly for forgetting her true desires. However, his direct approach only ended up hurting Rita even more instead of convincing her. Overwhelmed by her emotions, Rita dropped her bag and ran away from Sakurasu in the pouring rain. Nanami, Mashiro, and Sarada, who disagreed with the way Ryunosuke spoke to Rita, immediately threw their bags down and chased after her. They eventually found her sitting alone on a bench in a park. Sarada took the initiative to approach her and tried to comfort her by sharing his own experiences of living around talented individuals like Mashiro and Misaki. Sarada explained to Rita why she was remarkable to both him and Mashiro. Despite everyone being scared of her, Rita had stepped forward and been Mashiro's friend for 10 years. He emphasized that Rita had seen things that others could only see by facing the uncomfortable truths. Rita admitted that Ryunosuke was right about her, but she also pointed out that his behavior didn't make him a better person. Sarada continued by expressing how he felt working with geniuses like Misaki and Mashiro. He described it as an incredible experience to witness everyone creating something amazing. After Sarada finished speaking, Mashiro stepped forward and asked for confirmation about what Rita had revealed earlier. Mashiro admitted that she didn't understand everything, but she still felt sorry for Rita. This made Mashiro feel sad because she realized that she was the only one having fun while she was with Rita. Rita was touched by Mashiro's sincere expression of her true feeling. Rita reassured Mashiro that drawing with her for all those 10 years had also been fun for her. Rita agreed to help Mashiro finish the project. And with two talented artists working together, the project's graphics progressed much faster. Thanks to their hard work, the project made amazing progress and was completed in time for the presentation day. Sarada, as the director, gave an excellent presentation, showcasing all the effort that their friends had put into the project. As a result, the project was approved. To celebrate the project's clearance and to welcome Rita to the Sakurasu community, they held a party at Sakurasu. During the party, Rita expressed that she still believed Mashiro should return to the art world. However, due to the recent events, she willingly decided to postpone discussing the issue until after the festival was over. Rita also apologized to Ryunosuke for her reaction on that day and revealed her interest in his personality. Upon hearing this, Ryunosuke, who has a fear of women, quickly ran to his room. It's finally the cultural festival day and Sarada's class set up a chocolate banana stall. Miyahara noticed that Sarada looked tired and explained that he hadn't slept for days because he was working on Nayabora. Nanami, dressed in her outfit, took over at the stall so Sarada could focus on Nyaboran. In the prep room, Sarada and Jin worked together to complete Nyaboran and test its responsiveness. Suddenly, Misaki appeared and gave them each a bottle of energy drink. She also suggested that they take a break and go check out Mashiro's class's presentation, where she was dressed as a cat. As they walked towards Mashiro's class, they saw Mashiro outside their exhibit, holding a sign. They entered the exhibit and saw the amazing display. Misaki, who was wearing a bear costume, served them omelet rice and offered to draw a picture of them on the omelet using ketchup. This led to a playful argument between Misaki and Mashiro about who should draw on Sarada's omelet, with Mashiro winning in the end. Another girl from the class drew a cartoon on Jin's omelet, which made Misaki even more upset. After they finished eating, they all went back to the prep room to keep working. Meanwhile, in Sakurasu, Rita was in Ryunosuke's room, watching him complete the program for the animation. She also commented on the cultural festival and asked Ryunosuke to go to the festival with her, but he said he couldn't because he has gynophobia and can't handle being around a lot of women at the festival. Rita continued to tease him by getting closer while trying to convince him to go to the cultural festival together. After they moved the production to Sarada's room, Sarada took charge and directed the whole project. Rita and Mashiro worked on the sketch, Misaki animated the frames, Ryunosuke finished the program, Nanami practiced her cover voice, and Jin tested the animation. While everyone was busy, Nanami took a break and decided to make snacks for everyone. Unfortunately, she accidentally spilled sauce on herself and went to the bathroom to clean up. In the bathroom, she noticed a weighing scale. Just then, Sarada came out of the room and needed to use the toilet, but he found Nanami inside. While waiting for Nanami to finish getting dressed, Sarada overheard Rita talking on the phone about returning to England. This emphasized the fact that Mashiro needed to go back to England, as someone was waiting for her there. The next day at school, they continued working on Nyaboran. Ryunosuke ended up wearing the same maid outfit that Nanami wore earlier. Ryunosuke then asked Sarada to check out the climax of the project. Sarada thought that the climax was a bit plain, but he didn't have any ideas on how to improve it. Ryunosuke suggested that Sarada attend Fujisawa Kazuki's speech to find some inspiration. During the speech, Sarada learned that in order to create something good for others, it must first be something that he genuinely enjoys. After the speech, Sarada bumped into Mashiro, who informed him that Jin was with his ex-girlfriend, Kamigusa Fuka, while Misaki watched from a distance. Then there was a flashback where Fuka realized that she was just a substitute for Misaki because Jin didn't want Misaki to get hurt. It turned out that Jin's ex-girlfriend and Misaki were sisters, which explained Misaki's jealousy towards Fuka. Fuka jokingly asked Jin for a second chance, but he declined, saying he wasn't interested. During their conversation, Misaki overheard that Jin would be attending Osaka University of the Arts for college. Upset, Misaki ran away, and Sarada chased after her, apologizing for not telling her about Jin's plans. Misaki didn't mind and asked if she still had a chance with Jin. Mashiro straightforwardly answered yes, which suddenly motivated Misaki. She ignored everything Sarada said and asked them to finish Nyaboran and create a great memory out of it. In the midst of the commotion, Mashiro passed out and ended up sleeping on Sarada's shoulder. Sarada takes Mashiro to the prep room and she continues sleeping on his shoulder. Sarada starts thinking about how Mashiro showed her passion in her manga by drawing what she wanted to happen to Sarada at Sakurasu. This gives Sarada an idea. He suggests adding passion to their project. Instead of shouting the move's name, the audience would shout out their own feelings. They all agree and work hard to finish the revision. With 5 hours left before the show, they decide to take a quick nap to recharge. While Sarada tries to sleep, he gets a text from Mashiro. She wants him to be with her until she falls asleep, so he goes outside his room to keep her company. Sarada agrees to let Mashiro sleep in his room as she requested. While Sarada waits for Mashiro to fall asleep, she asks him if she has hurt him. Sarada is about to confess his feelings to Mashiro, but he realizes that she has already fallen asleep. The next morning, the team starts unloading their things for their presentation. As they are about to enter the theater room, they see a crowd outside. Jin manages to divert the crowd's attention to the student council president, Takebayashi Suwakaru. Meanwhile, Chihiro is looking for a seat and finds one next to her old friend and former Sakurasu resident Fujisawa Kazuki. Backstage, Nanami is doing final rehearsals for her voice actor lines, and the rest of the group is there to support her. After all the preparations are completed, the whole group gathers together. Sarada encourages them to make this their best memory, and with Misaki as the lead, they toss for success. The performance went smoothly as planned, with the audience participating and getting involved in the scenes. However, when it came to the climax and the audience was asked to shout their love and deepest thoughts, they hesitated, almost causing the show to fail. Sarada felt guilty about the situation, but Mashiro stood up and expressed her gratitude to Sarada for everything. Misaki followed by shouting at Jin to stop looking at Fuka. Rita asked Ryunosuke for his email, inspired by the team's example. The audience joined in and shouted their inner desires, ultimately saving the show and making it a huge success. Once the show ended, they started packing up the equipment and loading it into the car. While they were doing that, Jin explained to Misaki that Fuka was one of his ex-girlfriends and it would stay that way. Jin then gave Misaki the necklace he had bought with Mashiro earlier. Suddenly, they spotted Mashiro and Rita in a taxi heading to the airport. At the same time, Nanami found Sarada and told him that she couldn't find Mashiro and Rita after the show. This made Sarada remember his conversation with Rita earlier. Sarada was hesitant to try and stop Mashiro from returning to England, but Nanami insisted that he should because she knew how deeply he felt about her. Nanami also told Sarada that when he shouted "Thank you, Mashiro," he wasn't saying what he truly wanted to say. Sarada broke down and expressed his frustration about Mashiro seemingly throwing away everything they had been through in the past 6 months. Nanami comforted him and encouraged him to tell all of this to Mashiro directly. Afterward, they searched for Mashiro around the school. While Nanami was searching inside the school, she bumped into Miyahara Daichai, who confessed his love for her. Nanami kindly turned him down and ran away, feeling unsure about making decisions in such situations. Shortly after, Sarada and Nanami reunited with Misaki and the others, and they all headed to the airport together. When they arrived at the airport, Rita and Mashiro were about to enter the gate. Sarada rushed forward and hugged Mashiro tightly, pleading with her not to leave. To his surprise, Mashiro revealed that she had only gone to see Rita off and had no intention of leaving. Rita explained that when she said Mashiro was going back to where she belongs, she meant that Mashiro belonged at Sakurasu. Ryunosuke, at Rita's earlier request, gave her an email address, which turned out to be Sarada's. Before saying goodbye and returning to England, Rita playfully kissed Ryunosuke on the cheek as a punishment. The residents of Sakurasu then headed to the waving gallery and waved goodbye to Rita from there. In that moment, Mashiro, still confused by Sarada's earlier reaction, admitted that she felt something strange inside and wondered if it might be love. After Mashiro asks Sarada what love is, everything becomes surreal. Even Nyaboran comes to life, but then Sarada wakes up. At school, Sarada is eating alone on the rooftop, pondering about his dream from the previous night. Suddenly, Jin shows up and shares the survey responses from people about Nyaboran. Sarada mentions that he submits another design for the competition, this time with some assistance from Ryunosuke. They also discuss the commotion involving Rita and Ryunosuke at the airport. Shortly after, Nanami arrives with Mashiro, mentioning that Mashiro is looking for Sarada. And out of nowhere, Misaki appears on top of the building, causing Jin to pretend to be asleep suddenly. Things get interesting when Misaki tries to take advantage of the situation, but Jin wakes up and stops her. Misaki ends up giving Jin a lunchbox she made, confessing her love. Later in class, everyone is talking about their plans for Christmas. At the end of the school day, Nanami meets Jin in the locker room and finds out that Misaki sent him a love letter with a marriage form in it. Jin surprises Nanami by giving her tickets to a performance on Christmas Eve, telling her to enjoy herself while she can. Meanwhile, back at Sakurasu, Sarada is about to change clothes when Mashiro suddenly appears in his room without knocking. Sarada is completely shocked. Mashiro then reveals that she wants to learn how to cook. At first, Sarada disagrees, thinking that Mashiro is too naive to be skilled in cooking. But after some arguing, he finally agrees and decides to teach Mashiro how to cook. Unfortunately, the lesson doesn't go well, and Mashiro ends up cutting her finger while trying to cut a cucumber. Sarada asks Mashiro to inform Ayano about the cut and request a deadline extension. Shortly after, Ayano arrives and sees the cut. Just as Mashiro was about to leave, Sarada stops her and tells her that he needs to talk. They decide to go to a restaurant to have a conversation. During their talk, Ayano mentions that Mashiro seems to be transitioning into a more normal type of girl compared to when they first met her. Ayano then asks Sarada if he prefers the old Mashiro or the new one. Sarada admits that he actually prefers the old Mashiro. Sarada arrives at Sakurasu and discovers a letter from the competition. It seems like he didn't win again, which makes him really upset. Mashiro sees him and comes in wearing an apron. Sarada asks her what she's doing, and when she says she's cooking, he gets mad at her. Even though Mashiro assures him that she'll be careful, Sarada's anger doesn't subside. He throws the letter at her and tells her that since she was given the opportunity to draw, she shouldn't waste her time on anything else. Mashiro, in an unusually emotional tone, tells him that if that's what he wants, he should leave her alone. Later, in his room, Sarada looks at a note he received from Ayano, which was meant for Mashiro. Suddenly, Misaki appears dressed as a mini-skirt Santa and invites him to her room. Just as he's about to enter, he bumps into Nanami and asks her to join him. Inside, Misaki asks them to leave her alone with Jin at Sakurasu on Christmas Eve. On their way back from Misaki's room, Nanami asks Sarada to go with her to an event using a ticket she got from Jin. Sarada agrees and promises Nanami with a pinky swear that he'll go. Sarada, Nanami, and Misaki are helping Misaki with a plan to have the dorm all to themselves on Christmas Eve, except for her and Jin. Sarada goes to Mashiro's room to give her a party leaflet. But things are tense between them, so he doesn't knock and just leaves the paper on her door. As Sarada heads back to his room, he finds a Bankuchin on his doorstep. Suddenly, Mashiro jumps out of hiding. Sarada hears her stomach growl, and they end up sharing the Bankuchin. While they are talking, Sarada gets a little mad, which scares Mashiro. She keeps apologizing and bothering Sarada, which makes him even angrier. Poor Mashiro gets scared and runs away. The next day, Nanami's friends talk to her about her plans on the 24th, and they think it will be a date. They suggest that she wear a skirt. Jin is studying in the library when Takebayashi approaches him. They talk about Jin's plans to study in Osaka, away from Misaki. Suikaru kinda insults Jin by implying that he would find someone else there, but Jin stands up for himself and says that he has ended things with all the other girls he has been involved with. He assures Suikaru that Misaki isn't alone at Sakurasu. Suikaru asks Jin what he really wants, and Jin answers that he wants to be seen as someone important to Misaki, not just someone she loves. At Sakurasu, Misaki and Nanami were picking out clothes for Nanami's date with Sarada. While they were talking, Nanami asked Misaki if she ever felt scared about being open about her feelings and risking things getting awkward. Misaki admitted that she did feel scared, but she would rather confess her feelings than keep running in circles. Misaki said she's been running on that track for so long that she's tired of it. Sarada finished writing in his diary, and when he stepped outside, he found another Bankuchin on his doorstep. He bumped into Chihiro and they had a conversation. Chihiro said that Mashiro leaving Bankuchin for Sarada was her way of taking care of him. She mentioned that it's natural for people to get mad when they see others slacking off while they work hard, which made Sarada angry. Chihiro explained that Mashiro wasn't slacking off, she was just trying to understand her own feelings. She also said that Mashiro doesn't know how to make up with people and suggested that Sarada apologize to her. Sarada hesitated, but Chihiro told him not to see things in black and white, but rather in shades of gray. When Sarada asked what to do about Mashiro, she simply told him to take action because he's a man. Chihiro also reminded Sarada that the dorm will be closed during New Year as she'll be going to Australia for the holidays, so she advised him to pack his bags and go home. On Christmas Eve, Sarada asks Jin to pick up the cake, and then Misaki brings a dressed-up Mashiro. Sarada and Mashiro leave together. While on the train, Sarada wants to talk to Mashiro but feels scared to do so. At the hotel, Ayano takes care of Mashiro, but before they go, Mashiro pleads with Sarada to say something and not be angry with her. Instead of saying what she wants, Sarada reminds her to behave politely at the party. Soon, Sarada meets up with Nanami, who is wearing a nice skirt. He compliments her on it. And guess what? It starts snowing. Meanwhile, Rita and Maid get into a fight because Maid is jealous and doesn't let Rita talk to Ryunosuke. After the play, Sarada and Nanami walk and share their thoughts about it. While waiting to cross the street, Nanami tells Sarada about an upcoming audition for a voice acting role in February. She reveals that if she doesn't pass, she'll have to go back to Osaka. Nanami asks Sarada if he could listen to her if she succeeds in the auditions. Just then, Sarada receives a call from Ayano. During the call, Sarada learns that Mashiro is missing from the party and that she went outside according to the hotel staff. The sound of an ambulance passing by makes Sarada worried, so he quickly rushes out to search for Mashiro, leaving Nanami behind. Back at the dormitory, Misaki and Jin find themselves alone together. Misaki asks Jin if he loves her. Without hesitation, Jin tells her that he loves her with all his heart. Downtown, Sarada finally finds Mashiro near a fountain. She gives him another slice of bankuchen and explains that she waited for him outside because he was mad at her for a while. Mashiro admits that she misses him and wanted to do things that would make him happy, and the only thing she could think of was giving him bankuchen. Curious, Mashiro asks Sarada if he's still mad at her. He replies that he is mad, but then he hugs her. Sarada explains that he was mad because he was really worried about her and cares deeply for her well-being. Mashiro reveals that when she thought of him, she wanted to cook for him. After their heartfelt confessions, Nanami interrupts. Nanami hands Sarada the letter he received earlier. He opens it and discovers that the contest heads want another presentation from him, specifically about the entry he just submitted. The three of them end up feeling happy about the news. Back at the dormitory, they see Misaki looking really sad. She starts talking about what happened. It turns out that Jin rejected Misaki's feelings. He tells her that he can't take care of her properly in his current state. Instead, he just asks her to stay the way she is. This makes Misaki cry because she would have preferred Jin to be more direct and hurtful rather than saying it gently. Later on, there's a new scene where Sarada, Nanami, Misaki, and Mashiro are all sitting together on a train. They flash back to a scene at Sakurasu where they were talking about how the dormitory would be closed during New Year's since Chihiro is going on vacation to Australia. Sarada realizes that no one has made any plans because Mashiro didn't make arrangements. Nanami couldn't go home, and Misaki didn't want to go home because it reminded her of Jin. To solve the problem, Chihiro suggested that they all stay with Sarada in Fukuoka. Mashiro agrees and tells everyone to hurry up and pack. On the train, Sarada plays with his cat Kamachi while talking to Nanami about him going home with 3 girls. Misaki, who is still feeling sad, just looks out the window quietly. Mashiro, who always has a calm expression, gives Sarada a snack. Before they know it, they arrive at the station. When they get to Sarada's house, his little sister Yuuko is surprised to see him bringing the girls from Sakurasu with him. Their mom, Kanda Akiko, suddenly appears and greets everyone. Yuuko realizes that everyone at home, except her, already knew about the visit and they kept it a secret to surprise her. Their dad also shows up and jokingly mentions that he doesn't approve of having multiple partners while Akiko calls them all for dinner. Nanami compliments Sarada on his family and how he was able to adapt to Sakurasu, while Misaki keeps thinking about Jin. In Sarada's room, he called Jin to find out what happened on Christmas Eve and why Misaki was feeling down. Jin explained everything to Sarada, including how he confessed his love to Misaki but also had dreams he wanted to fulfill for her sake. Jin also mentioned that he broke up with all his girlfriends because of his feelings for Misaki. At the end of the conversation, Jin asked Sarada to take care of Misaki for him. Afterward, the whole Kanda family and their guests had dinner. Nanami helped Akiko wash the dishes, and Akiko surprised everyone by saying that Sarada had found a good future wife. This statement surprised Sarada, Mashiro, and Yuuko, who were still at the dining table. Mashiro asked Sarada if he wanted a wife, while Yuuko grabbed her brother's arm and declared that anyone who wanted to be Sarada's wife had to defeat her. Mashiro took the statement seriously. Yuuko then mentioned that she wanted to apply to Suiko, but her father wouldn't allow it. Nanami offered to help Yuuko study in order to change her father's mind and let her apply to Suiko. Meanwhile, Misaki stared at the script that Jin had given her before he left. The next day, Sarada begins working on his presentation with the help of Ryunosuke's maid. After Sarada expresses his gratitude to maid, She jokingly suggests that he should take a trip to England to make Rita miserable as a way of showing his thanks. She also asks Sarada to let her know how his presentation turns out. Just then, Sarada's little sister enters the room and asks for his help with studying. Before they can start, Sarada notices a magazine in her pile of books. Yuuko reveals that she loves a manga created by none other than Mashiro, not realizing that Mashiro herself is in the room. Yuuko mentions that she finds the depiction of Misaki and Jin's relationship confusing. When Yuuko discovers that Mashiro is the author, her attitude toward her suddenly changes, and she asks for an autograph. Nanami then enters and takes Yuuko with her to study. Meanwhile, Sarada takes the opportunity to ask Mashiro about her manga deadline. Mashiro reveals that she has already finished it long before and asks Sarada if he means what he said on Christmas Eve. After Sarada gets confirmation from Mashiro, she gives him a picture for his presentation. He practices for the presentation later, and it goes really well. After the practice, Sarada goes back to his room and reviews his presentation with Nanami. He asks her what she would ask if she were one of the judges. Sarada is still a bit nervous about the presentation, which is happening after New Year's. Nanami suggests asking about the game's marketability, which surprises Sarada because he hadn't considered that. He then finishes his presentation. Sarada thanks Nanami and asks if he's been bothering her by asking for help all the time. Nanami reassures him that she's happy to help and suggests that he can repay her by helping with her script for an audition. Sarada promises to help, wanting Nanami's hard work to pay off. They both promise to work hard. And then Mashiro interrupts and says she wants to work hard with them too before leaving the room. In the hallway, Mashiro has a conversation with Misaki about her relationship with Jin and what she truly desires. Mashiro reveals that her manga is based on the daily activities of Sakurasu, but in her story, Misaki and Jin are a couple. Misaki expresses her desire to be by Jin's side forever. Mashiro then asks Misaki what it is about her that Jin likes, using Sarada's love for Misaki's drawing ability as a benchmark. Meanwhile, Sarada and Nanami are cooking soba for everyone. Akiko, impressed by Yuuko's hard work, asks Sarada to help Yuuko as well. Sarada takes the opportunity to ask his mother to let Yuuko try for Suiko, and if she doesn't pass the test, he suggests redirecting her to a local high school. Sarada's father unexpectedly appears while Sarada is in the bath. Sarada asks his father to support Yuuko's aspirations and to let her study at Suiko if she passes. They discuss Sarada's love life, and his father advises him to live life the way he wants. The next morning, the whole family and their guests went to a mountaintop to watch the sunrise. Meanwhile, Misaki couldn't stop thinking about what Mashiro had asked her earlier. At the mountain, Yuuko, who knew that her brother had talked to their father, thanked Sarada. Misaki also thanked Mashiro for helping her realize the importance of Jin and the parts of herself that Jin likes. Misaki recognized her mistake of being so down because of Jin and promised to return to her old self and turn Jin's script into an anime. As they were talking, the sun began to rise, marking the first sunrise of the new year. In that moment, they all shouted their wishes, dreams, and burdens to the rising sun. Mashiro shouted meatball, referring to their project earlier. After the holiday ended, the four of them returned to Sakurasu feeling happy and motivated to overcome any challenges and schedules. The next day, Sarada is getting ready for his presentation. Nanami comes out of the bathroom and sees Misaki drawing in the common room. They start talking, and Misaki shows Nanami the script for the anime. After Nanami reads it, she asks Misaki if she can borrow it because she wants to use a few lines from the script for her upcoming audition. Misaki agrees and lets her borrow the script. The following morning, Sarada gets a phone call from Yuuko. It turns out that Yuuko will be taking her entrance exams at Suiko on February 13th. Yuuko sends her regards to her brother on his presentation day, and after thanking her, Sarada hangs up. During breakfast, Mashiro says kind words to Sarada, lifting his spirits. Chihiro, who wakes up shortly after, reminds Sarada to relax and enjoy the experience instead of trying too hard. They all then attend the opening ceremony of the spring semester. After the speech, Misaki spots Jin and Suikaru sitting together. Misaki tries to hide from them by making bullfrog noises, but Sarada spots her. He approaches Jin and asks him about his absence at the apartments. Jin explains that he will return after his entrance exams. Eventually, Jin leaves, and Sarada is asked to take the bullfrog away. After school, Sarada is heading to his presentation. While writing, he gets a text from Nanami telling him to work hard. It makes Sarada happy, and he starts his presentation with a humorous mishap of bumping his head on the microphone. He remembers Chihiro's advice to not take everything too seriously and becomes motivated. While presenting, Fujisawa Kazuki and his colleague discuss the game's saleability and realize that it's too expensive to produce. They would need to sell 45,000 copies to recoup the costs, but they only expect to sell 10,000. However, they offer Sarada a chance to work with the production team to improve the concept. Fujisawa asks Sarada to email him once he gets home to set up a meeting. Sarada leaves the conversation feeling very happy. Back at the dormitory, everyone except Chihiro and Jin celebrates Sarada's success. While eating, Sarada thanks Nanami for her message. Mashiro overhears and goes back to her room to send the same text to Sarada. Mashiro seems a little jealous, mentioning that Sarada treats Nanami in a special way. Nonetheless, Sarada thanks Mashiro for the picture she sent, saying it really helped. After dinner, Sarada and Nanami wash the dishes together. While doing so, Sarada wishes Nanami good luck. Suddenly, Nanami asks Sarada for a favor. The scene then changes to the two of them alone in the common room. Nanami tells Sarada that she has something to confess and reveals that she has always loved him. After a moment of stammering, Sarada apologizes and says he can't reciprocate. It turns out they were just practicing lines for Nanami's audition. Mashiro watches them from a distance. The next day, Mashiro goes to Ayano and shares her feelings about Sarada and Nanami. Ayano suggests that Mashiro channel her emotions into drawing manga and gives her a manga to read for inspiration. On the school roof, Nanami, Mayu, and Yaoi discuss Nanami's script practice with Sarada the previous night. Mayu and Yaoi encourage Nanami to confess her feelings to Sarada on Valentine's Day, but Nanami refuses. Later that night, Sarada helps Nanami practice again while Misaki is busy with her anime. Sarada takes a break with Mashiro. A few days later, Sarada meets up with Fujisawa. During their conversation about the game, it's revealed that Fujisawa was Chihiro's classmate. They continue talking, and Fujisawa advises Sarada to give his new game his all, just like he did with Nayabara. Later on, Yuuko comes to Sakurasu while reading the latest chapter of Mashiro's manga. During dinner, Yuuko gives Mashiro a thumbs up. Nanami then arrives and finds out that Sarada has done her laundry, prepared her dinner, and even cleared a path for her. Yuuko finds it strange and interprets Sarada's actions as taking care of Nanami. In her room, Nanami continues practicing and notices a present she bought, which she hides in her drawer. Meanwhile, Misaki is busy making homemade chocolates. In Sarada's room, Yuuko talks about what she heard and mentions that she should have set her eyes on Nanami instead of Mashiro. Suddenly, Mashiro enters Sarada's room wearing only a towel and carrying a hairdryer. Mashiro asks Sarada how long he's going to stare at her, leading to a fight between the siblings. The next day, Yuuko says goodbye to everyone as she's going home after the exam. Before leaving, she gives Sarada a box of chocolates and asks him who will be the lucky girl the next day. Yuuko reminds Sarada not to be indecisive, just like his father told him. In the morning, Sarada was feeding his cats when he saw Nanami all dressed up and ready to leave. He felt disappointed because he couldn't wish her luck before she left. In Mashiro's room, she received a phone call from Ayano who told Mashiro that the artist in charge of the cover was sick and asked her to do it instead. Mashiro took off her yellow plot and switched it for a more colorful pair. Sarada called Mashiro and was surprised to see that she had dressed herself, although with a few small mistakes. While Sarada was checking if Mashiro was ready, Rita came into the room. Rita had come all the way from England for Valentine's Day and believed it was a competition for women. Rita went to find Ryunosuke and they had a chaotic encounter. Finally, Sarada and Mashiro left together. Later, Sarada arrives at school and has a conversation with Nanami. He apologizes for not being able to encourage her earlier, and Nanami accepts his apology. Nanami reminds Sarada of a promise he made earlier. Miyahara interrupts their conversation but quickly leaves after wishing Nanami good luck. Class begins, and the teacher talks about chocolate. Koharu teaches the students about love in a bitter way. Meanwhile, Sarada receives a text from Mashiro, saying she will be waiting for him on the roof after school. Back at the dormitory, Rita and Ryunosuke are there. Ryunosuke tries to avoid Rita by staying in the bathroom. When Rita offers him chocolate, he rudely rejects it. She confesses that she was really happy to receive an email from him on Christmas Eve, but he dismisses it as a sign of respect. After classes end, Nanami goes to her audition while Sarada is on cleaning duty. While taking out the trash, Sarada sees Misaki and Sayori sitting on a bench. Misaki has some chocolate for Jin, which Sarada comments on as being small but still enough. Sarada looks at the roof and hopes that Mashiro hasn't been waiting too long for him. Suddenly, he receives a call from Nanami. Turns out, the trains have stopped, making it difficult for her to get home. Sarada decides to go and pick her up, apologizing to Mashiro for being late. On his way, he spots Miyahara and asks if he can borrow his bike, explaining the situation involving Nanami. Miyahara, upon hearing it's about Nanami, offers Sarada a ride. Later, Miyahara is riding the bike uphill. When they reach the top, Miyahara offers the bike to Sarada, telling him to go ahead without him because Sarada was the one Nanami called for when she was feeling down. Sarada quickly reaches the station. Nanami is feeling down and hopeless about the situation. Sarada encourages her not to give up on her dreams because they made a promise to work hard together. Inspired, Nanami hops on the bike, and together they continue on their journey. Back at Sakurasu, Ryunosuke finally comes out of the bathroom. He goes to the common room and finds a present from Rita for Valentine's Day. There's a note with the chocolate saying that Rita has already left. In the letter, Rita explains that she's really busy and apologizes to everyone at Sakurasu for not being able to see them. At the end of the letter, she confesses that the kiss she gave Ryunosuke at the airport was her first. Sayori and Misaki are still at school, but Jin didn't show up. However, this doesn't bring Misaki down because she believes she still has chances. Meanwhile, Mashiro is waiting for Sarada in her classroom, but eventually leaves. While Sarada and Nanami are on their way to the audition, they practice one last time. When Nanami reaches the line, she tells Sarada that she loves him. Sarada stops the bike, but it turns out Nanami was just testing him to see if it made his heart skip a beat. They stop a few blocks away from the voice acting school, and Nanami runs off, leaving Sarada behind. He realizes he forgot about Mashiro and hurries to school to find her. Thinking she had gone home, Sarada is surprised to see Mashiro on the side of the roof. She tells him that he always breaks their promises, but he realizes it's because he forgets to call her by her first name. Mashiro gives him choco shoots, which he prefers over choco mushrooms. Misaki is working on her anime, and Jin tries calling her, but she doesn't answer. Meanwhile, Jin reveals that he passed the exam for Osaka University of Arts. Sarada is on his way to a meeting with Fujisawa, who approves of Sarada's plans and asks him to write a final design document. Fujisawa also suggests getting Mashiro to draw the art, so Sarada agrees to ask her. They find out that the Suiko entrance exam results will be released that day. Chihiro mentions she has a meeting, and Nanami asks if she can go with Sarada to school. They all head to school together, with Mashiro joining because she wants to know if Yuiko passed. Mashiro has different plans depending on the outcome, but Sarada needs to approve. As Sarada and Mashiro wait at a traffic light, Sarada asks Mashiro if she can create more drawings for his game design ideas. Surprisingly, Mashiro agrees right away. Sarada is a bit confused and worried that she might not have enough time for her manga. Mashiro misunderstands his confusion and thinks he's mad again, so Sarada reassures her that he's not mad but actually very happy that she's willing to make him happy. At school, they check Yuiko's results and sadly, she didn't pass. Sarada calls Yuiko to let her know. Just as he hangs up, Sayori and Suikairu approach him. They share the news that Sayori's younger brother, Haimiya Iori, passed the music department at school. Suikairu informs the group that Jin is at the school to announce his success at his university to his homeroom advisor. Sarada feels it's important for Misaki and Jin to see each other before they graduate, so he asks Nanami to bring Misaki to school. Sarada and Mashiro quickly catch up to Jin and ask him to go to the school's roof. Once there, they discuss Misaki, and Jin suggests that with Misaki's intense focus on her work, she might forget about him. Sarada pleads with Jin to talk to Misaki, but Jin refuses, explaining that he can't date her. This sudden change in Jin's attitude angers Sarada, causing him to grab Jin by the collar. In response, Jin punches Sarada, leading to a brawl between the two. Jin manages to overpower Sarada, but Sarada gets back up and continues to beg Jin to go out with Misaki. Mashiro then informs Jin that Misaki will come, but Jin dismisses it, as Misaki has been ignoring him for some time. Meanwhile, Nanami arrives at Misaki's room and asks her to come with her. As expected, Misaki refuses, using the excuse that she needs to finish the anime. Nanami reminds Misaki not to keep her feelings bottled up. A memory from Misaki's childhood appears, showing how she and Jin have been friends since they were little. Misaki regrets not realizing her love for Jin sooner. The flashback also reveals that Misaki often felt lonely and disliked by her classmates, who treated her badly. Jin defended her from boys who objectified her. Meanwhile, the school headmaster notices Misaki's odd behavior. In the present, Misaki decides to avoid Jin because she's afraid of saying something hurtful. Mashiro believes Nanami will bring Misaki to the school roof. Jin is happy about this because they both attend Suiko University. In another flashback, the headmaster talks to Misaki about attending Suiko University, thinking it would be good for her. Jin is also interested in going to Suiko because he wants to protect Misaki. Later, Nanami reminds Misaki that Jin is leaving soon. She encourages Misaki to seize the moment, and they head to school together. On the roof, Jin is grateful for having friends who support Misaki. Misaki and Jin talk, and Jin tells her he's moving in April. He gives her a ring as a symbol of his love and asks her to wait for him, which Misaki tearfully accepts. The administration interrupts, but Jin locks them out. He tells everyone to go home, meeting back to Sakurasu dormitory. They happily leave, knowing Jin is finally returning home after being away for a while. In the end, Sarada assures everyone that they'll always be welcome at Sakurasu. However, they learn that the dorm will be demolished soon. Chihiro tells everyone that Sakurasu will be torn down before the next term. Apparently, a construction company checked the building during winter break and found it unsuitable. After Chihiro leaves, the residents discuss what to do next. Misaki suggests talking to the principal, but Jin disagrees because it might make the principal more determined to demolish the dorm. Nanami and Sarada suggest making the board listen to them, but Jin thinks they should be logical and consider moving to the regular dorms, where they won't have to do chores. Ryunosuke suggests weighing the pros and cons, which would buy them more time. In Jin's room, he and Misaki have a conversation about why the administration wants to demolish Sakurasu. They both agree that they can't let the dorm be torn down because it holds a lot of sentimental value. In Sarada's room, he explains to Mashiro what it would mean if the dorm gets demolished, and how it would affect his ability to take care of her. One of Sarada's cats finds a picture, triggering his memories of when he first moved into the dorm. Sarada then shares his story with Mashiro, talking about his memories before she arrived. A flashback shows how Sarada moved into Sakurasu and met the other residents. He called Misaki an alien and Ryunosuke a ghost. Misaki welcomed him with a hot pot celebration. After Sarada shares this story with Mashiro, he becomes even more determined to save Sakurasu from being demolished. He believes that despite its old age and flaws like his broken door lock, creaky floorboards, and leaks, those imperfections are part of their memories there. He also thinks that the problems they face are what make them belong in Sakurasu. Everyone agrees to work together to stop the dormitory from being torn down, including Ryunosuke, who was initially disappointed with the school administration. It turns out Jin had him hack into their servers. The students all promise to protect the dorm. In his room, Ryunosuke is seen hacking into the school's system to find out why Sakurasu is being torn down. Meanwhile, Sarada, Nanami, and Mashiro stand at the school gates, asking for people to sign their petition to save Sakurasu. They're struggling until Daichai comes and becomes the first to sign, boosting their morale. Later, they're disappointed with only 3 signatures after half a day. Ryunosuke joins them and shows them what he found, minutes from a school meeting. Sarada reads them and learns that the construction company suggested demolishing Sakurasu within 5 years. But the administration wants Mashiro to move out so she can focus on painting instead of manga. Ryunosuke explains that they're worried about the school's reputation if Mashiro doesn't succeed in manga. Sarada storms off to confront the principal, but Ryunosuke warns him they obtained the information using hacking. He also suggests letting Mashiro leave. Sarada refuses, saying their bonds aren't tied to the dorm. Mashiro interrupts briefly, asking for guidance. After Mashiro leaves, Ryunosuke explains his past struggles with collaboration in middle school, leading to his reclusive behavior. Later, Sarada confides in Kazuki about his dilemma. Kazuki advises him to find a way to make both his choices work. Sarada and Nanami talk on their way home, discussing Nanami's dream of becoming a voice actress. Back at the dorm, they find Mashiro awaiting Nanami's audition results. Nanami didn't get the part but hides her disappointment. Misaki suggests a new plan, wearing costumes to gather signatures, but it backfires. On the roof, Sarada, Jin, and Mashiro worry about Nanami pushing herself too hard. Rita calls Ryunosuke, urging him not to give up. At school, they discover signatures in the computer lab, realizing Ryunosuke's involvement. They hug him in gratitude, revitalizing their hope. That night, they find they've gathered 300 signatures, and Mashiro expresses her love for Sakurasu. The Sakurasu residents and their campaign is going well, gathering support from students and shop owners in the marketplace, especially since many knew Sarada. One day, they met Ayano, who gave Mashiro a magazine with her on the cover. Sarada realized they only had a few days left for their campaign. After the opening theme, they were seen collecting signatures in the rain. Nanami looked sad, and Sarada received news that he didn't make the cut for a game design competition. Kazuki explained that another game similar to Sarada's, but with popular songs, got chosen instead. Sarada felt hurt and powerless. He found Nanami crying in class and took her to the nurse's office. Later, he discovered Nanami outside in the rain, feeling overwhelmed. Sarada encouraged her to face her problems and promised to listen to her. Nanami opened up about her frustrations, and they shared a heartfelt moment in the rain. Back at the nurse's office, Sarada comforted Nanami until she fell asleep. He shared his recent failure with her and advised her to take a break. Sarada fell asleep too, only to wake up after school and find they hadn't gathered enough signatures. Feeling disappointed, Sarada was reminded by Ryunosuke that they did their best. They returned home, where Sarada received mail informing Mashiro of a job offer as a character designer. Feeling life was unfair, Sarada became angry, and Mashiro asked if it was because of her before storming into the house. Mashiro is packing her suitcase in the art room, adding her signature to a painting. She looks satisfied and smiles. Sarada remembers the painful moment when he found out Mashiro was offered a job while his proposal was rejected. He admits he didn't want to blame Mashiro but couldn't help feeling disappointed. In the morning, Sarada and Misaki discuss the graduation ceremony. Jin reminds Sarada to wake up Mashiro, but Nanami appears first. They talk about Nanami's tears from the day before. Nanami wishes Sarada would forget it, but he wants to talk about it. Sarada finds Mashiro's room empty and realizes she's gone. Chihiro confirms this, explaining Mashiro insisted on leaving. They search for Mashiro at school and find her bag in the art room, along with a painting of Sakurasu. Sarada realizes Mashiro left to protect the dorm, unaware she was the reason it was facing demolition. The residents refuse to accept her departure, and Sarada decides to confront her. Sarada and Nanami team up to search for Mashiro. Nanami reminds Sarada of a promise he made, expressing her gratitude for his inspiration. Sarada reciprocates, and Nanami nearly confesses her love before thanking him instead. Ryunosuke suggests contacting Rita for places Mashiro might go. Rita surprises Ryunosuke by appearing in person and assures him Mashiro is determined. Back at the dorm, Chihiro discards a letter that caused trouble. Kazuki apologizes to Chihiro, and they discuss Sakurasu's future. At school, Misaki and Jin run out of time for the ceremony. They meet Suikaru and Sayori and head to the venue. Meanwhile, Sarada remembers his first days at school and his meeting with Mashiro as he chases after her. At the train tracks, Mashiro blames herself for the dorm's troubles and assumes Sarada hates her. Sarada confesses his jealousy, but also his love for her. The train arrives, and Mashiro prepares to leave, but Sarada professes his love again. Nanami intervenes, reminding Mashiro she's not solely to blame for the dorm's problems and embraces her, prompting Mashiro to cry. Sarada tells Mashiro that Sakurasu is more than just a building, it's the people inside it. Mashiro understands and promises they'll always be part of Sakurasu. Ryunosuke and Rita arrive, urging them to hurry to the ceremony. As they run, Sarada hopes the day will be as beautiful as cherry blossoms. Mashiro, Sarada, Nanami, Ryunosuke, and Rita all went to the graduation ceremony together. It turns out that Ryunosuke helped Rita make sakura brooches for everyone to wear. As they entered the halls, they could hear the Suimai High School hymn being sung in the background. Mashiro, Sarada, and Nanami arrived just as the singing started, but Ryunosuke and Rita decided to stay outside. Ryunosuke didn't want to get tired or bored at the ceremony, and he's not a fan of emotional events. Inside, a lower-classman gave a speech to thank the graduating class. The third-year speech representative turned out to be Misaki, much to everyone's surprise since the speech is usually done by Student Council President Takebayashi. It is then made clear that the love letter from before was actually the speech Misaki was writing. Misaki shared her story about why she applied to Suiko. She talked about how she didn't have friends in middle school and hoped to meet new people at Suiko. She started to associate her friends with the Sakura dormitory, which made the administration unhappy. She then talked about when she first moved into the dorm. She was initially evicted from the regular dorms but ended up moving into Sakurasu, where Chihiro was the only resident at the time. Misaki expressed her desire to have the rooms filled with more people, and guess what? Her dream actually came true. Misaki looks back on her last year and how many of her dreams came true. She reveals that Mashiro became the new resident in the spring. They had a tradition of having hot pots almost every week, and she mentions sneaking into the school pool and the cultural festival. Unfortunately, winter brought some tough times for them. In her speech, Misaki thanks each of the dormitory residents and then goes against the school's wishes by talking about their plans to demolish Sakurasu. She passionately asks everyone in the hall to support their campaign to save their beloved dormitory. The school head gets angry and tells Misaki to stop, but Jin steps in and reminds him that he approved the changes in the speech. This makes the school head even more furious, and he orders other members of the administration to remove Misaki from the stage. Just as she's about to be taken away, Sarada grabs the microphone and redirects the attention towards himself. Nanami and Mashiro also speak up, and security starts coming after Sarada. The rest of the students in the school join in, moved by the residents' actions to protect what they love. They all stand up together in support of Sakurasu. At this point, Sarada starts crying, overwhelmed by their incredible support. He quickly goes up to Misaki and tells her that he doesn't want her to leave just yet. Misaki encourages Sarada, telling him to achieve with the new residents what they couldn't accomplish with her. After the administrator tells everyone to return to their seats, Ryunosuke speaks up and reminds the school heads that the audience supports them. Suikaru stands up and reminds the principal that Sakurasu was created to nurture the artistic talents of students without worrying about society's judgment. Chihiro demands a vote on the matter. Jin takes the microphone, but Misaki suggests a unique way to vote against the demolition. She asks everyone who opposes the demolition to fill the air with cherry blossoms by throwing their brooches into the air. The scene then transitions to a beautiful blue sky. It turns out that Sarada and the Sakurasu residents were kicked out of the auditorium, but they successfully convinced the headmaster to change his decision about demolishing Sakurasu. The group then sings a graduation song for elementary school students. While singing, they hold hands and run away together. Sarada is busy fixing the sign at the gate when Nanami arrives and comments on his work. Sarada asks Nanami if she has packed up for her trip to Osaka. He notices that she only has a small bag and asks about it. Nanami assures him that she will be back soon. In a flashback, we see Sarada and Nanami in the courtyard at night. Nanami expresses her strong desire to become a voice actress. Chihiro suddenly interrupts their conversation and advises Nanami to return to Osaka and convince her parents. Chihiro believes that being an adult means not making decisions solely on your own, but also considering the opinions of others. Nanami agrees with Chihiro's words. Just before leaving, Chihiro tells Nanami that her 2 years at Sakurasu were not in vain. In the present time, Misaki arrives with a rental van to pick up everyone. They say their goodbyes before leaving. Just as Chihiro is about to enter Sakurasu, Kazuki appears and asks her out on a date. On their way to Narita Airport, the group sings the song. They first bid farewell to Rita. After shaking hands, Rita playfully pulls Ryunosuke closer and kisses him, much to the delight of the crowd. This surprises Ryunosuke and makes Maid, who is connected to Ryunosuke's tablet, quite upset. Next, Jin and Nanami depart. At the train station, Misaki is seen crying because she can't bear the thought of Jin leaving. Jin comforts her by giving her a kiss, leaving the others blushing. He then hands Misaki a marriage form, suggesting that they hold on to it until he returns so they can submit it together. Touched by his gesture, Misaki hugs Jin while shedding tears. After Nanami informs Sarada that she will also be leaving, he wishes her a safe trip home. However, Mashiro disagrees and claims that Sakurasu is her home. Nanami embraces Mashiro and assures her that she will definitely return. Misaki is the last one to depart and informs the remaining group members that she will be studying at Suima University, not too far away, and that she is entrusting the dormitory to them. With that, she sets off. Sarada then asks Ryunosuke if he can create games on his own. Ryunosuke explains that while Sarada's programming skills are limited, he can use free game engines to make a game. Ryunosuke then takes his leave, mentioning that he occasionally needs to work outside his room. Mashiro and Sarada go to see the cherry blossoms. As they gaze at the beautiful blooms, Sarada realizes that they are standing beneath the very tree where they first met. They both admire the blossoms with a sense of nostalgia. Jin and Nanami are on a train to Osaka, sipping coffee and having a chat. Nanami is a bit nervous because she talked to her dad about her future. Jin brings up Sarada, and that makes Nanami blush. Later, Sarada and Mashiro come back home and Sarada looks at the empty rooms. He remembers Misaki's speech about filling the place. Suddenly, he hears a noise and rushes upstairs to find Mashiro on the floor. Mashiro wanted to hang up her painting. Sarada notices the painting of Mashiro holding Hikari, which surprises him. Mashiro asks Sarada for a kiss, but Hikari jumps in and scratches Sarada's face. Mashiro gives Sarada a kiss on the cheek instead. After the entrance ceremony at the school, Haze Kana is talking with her classmates and she mentions that she's moving to Sakurasu because she doesn't want a roommate, especially not a noisy one like the one she already has. Kana then goes to the faculty room to submit her paperwork. Turns out Kana was the highest scorer in the entrance examination, and after her there's a guy named Jaime Iori. He got expelled from the regular dormitory because he was caught peeking in the girls' baths there. Chihiro warns them that their high school lives might not be normal, but still welcomes them. In the dorm room, Nanami is back and Sarada is getting ready to host a party for the new students moving in. They chat about Nanami's talks with her dad. She explains that even though her dad wasn't thrilled, he had to agree because she was serious and took her time to explain. Nanami notices Sarada working on another game document. He asks for her help, and she agrees. At the same time, the new students arrive at the dorm and get a big scare. They hear strange things and see scary sights when they enter. Sarada walks out of the kitchen with a knife covered in something that looks like blood. This freaks out Iori, who runs outside and sees Ryunosuke holding a sickle. Scared, Iori rushes back inside and hides in Mashiro's room. After noticing Mashiro and her messy room, he introduces himself. She asks him to take off his clothes. He thinks she's hitting on him, but it turns out she just wants to paint him. Just then Nanami comes in and gets surprised to see him without a shirt. Mashiro explains that she needed to see him shirtless for her painting. Yuko tells them that her brother wasn't told about the news to surprise him. She says he looked at the wrong number. Mashiro finally comes downstairs with her painting, and everyone is surprised to see themselves in it. Turns out, Yuko is already a resident of Sakurasu, but Mashiro didn't know. Then, the doorbell rings, and it's their new neighbor, Misaki. She explains that she couldn't wait for Jin to graduate, so she got married and rushes to the kitchen. Thanks for watching till this long, my fellow men of culture. Don't forget to tell us about your favorite waifu from this anime and subscribe to the channel for more content.